Joining us is John Connor, the head of the Climate Institute. He's in our Sydney studio today. John, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tim.
Tell us first, some comments made this morning by the Climate Minister, Greg Hunt, saying he consulted Wikipedia on this question of whether there's a connection between climate change and the New South Wales bushfires, and the Wikipedia evidence apparently supports no connection. What's your comment to the Climate Minister?
Well, I think all he said was that Wikipedia showed that there are fires in Australia, and that is something that we do know. What we also do know is the data is clear. The Forest Fire Danger Index has been increasing, so the representation of the danger has been increasing since the 70s, the biggest increase since the 90s, and it's been increasing also, and particularly in spring and autumn, which means that the fire weather season has been extending. And all of the projections are for climate change and for global warming is that they will increase exponentially.
The Prime Minister said yesterday that the UN climate scientists talking about this issue and saying there was a connection was speaking out of a hat. How did that strike you when you saw that comment?
Well, look, I think with the greatest respect, the Prime Minister is caught a bit straddling the carbon barbed wire fence here in Australia. On one hand, it should be acknowledged, he's accepting that climate change is real, but on the other hand, not looking at the risks and not looking at the projections of the fire danger, but also the reality. He reeled off an impressive list of bushfires that we've had, but as Professor Jones from Melbourne University has pointed out, the years between those in the last century were 29, 14, 11, 9, 6, 4. That's the data, is that the fire danger is increasing. We are seeing unprecedented fires on a continual basis. The Victorian fire of 2009 was. We've seen previous ones in Adelaide, unprecedented. We're still to see the full data of these and what may come this summer. But what is very clear is that here in New South Wales we had the warmest September on record, the warmest 3 months on record, the winter, and Australia we had the warmest 12 months on record. So and the bushfire fighters themselves were calling these unparalleled circumstances. So for the Prime Minister, I think, is in a precarious position perched atop this barbed wire fence. We need to look at the risk and better prepare for those risks, but also better engage with reducing those risks.
So is it possible for the Prime Minister to say on the one hand that he accepts the climate science, and on the other to say that there is no connection between climate change and the bushfires?
I don't think the Prime Minister can have it both ways. It's the unfortunate truth. If you look at the data and if you look at what the climate scientists are saying and how the Australian Fire and Emergency Council, for example, is interpreting that science, is that we need to be improving and increasing our readiness for these events. And they've performed magnificently over the last few days and week. But they are amongst the many which are saying, well, we need to look at this data, we need to take it seriously, we need to increase continue to increase our readiness. In our view, the Australia at a national and at state levels need to increase our readiness. We've had a global average increase of temperature of 1 degree, which has been driving some of these changes. Australia and the rest of the world has joined in setting in stone, setting an indicator that we want to avoid 2 degrees warming, but the IPCC and others are saying we're heading towards 4 degrees warming. In our view, we need to be very focused on our national interest in avoiding 2 degrees and planning for that, but also planning for the chance we'll get 4 degrees warming. So that needs to be embedded in our resourcing, our planning approvals and other decision making at Commonwealth and state levels. But we also need to be there ready to, in terms of really reducing the risk, is actually putting on the table what is our effort to avoid those 2 degrees warming, and that is the up to 25% reductions by 2020, which both parties, and to their credit, the government has actually internationally, after the election, has said that they're still willing to go up to that sort of a target. That's the only fair income target if we're serious about climate change and avoiding the big risks of increased global warming.
Now, I know you see some significance in the fact that New South Wales Rural Fire Service has said that an Army explosives training exercise triggered the 50,000 hectare blaze near Lithgow this week. Why is that significant?
Well, I think it's important to reflect that we have cascading consequences from global warming and from these increased fire danger. And so if it's true that the fire started there, then this is going to cramp the style, the operating space of our security forces, amongst many others. I mean, they may have to sit in the barracks for extended periods for this more extended fire danger season. I know we've had talks from security experts that certainly around the world and to some extent here in Australia, they've been looking at these issues. It goes to how we store munitions, how we actually shelter our fighter planes, the kind of runways that we build. These things are all illustrative of our national interest in avoiding serious global warming and certainly avoiding that 2 degrees, and why we need to look to the risks of those 2 degrees and lift our game in that regard, but also have a fair income effort that we take to global negotiations to avoid those risks.
Many federal MPs and others are saying, look, you know, we can have this climate change debate another time, thank you. There is no way we should be discussing this in the context of the New South Wales fires, because it's an insult to those who are facing life-threatening situations and loss of their property. What do you say to that?
Oh, look, I think there's been some unhelpful personalisation of this issue, and I don't think Al Gore's contributions last night were helpful in that regard either. People should be a bit aware of some of the politics and how delicate it is here, but I don't think we should be avoiding that discussion. I do think it's treating the families and firefighters who are on the front line and the countless others in future who will be on the front line with reckless disregard if we don't have this discussion. I think, you know, we wait till all this settles down and then some footballers behaving badly and people won't take this issue seriously. So I do think it's important that we have the conversation. I don't think it's good to personalise these things, but we do need that our business leaders need to face up to the risks and have a plan to reduce those risks.
There is talk this morning in the media about the Environment Minister attaching some of the legislation needed for his direct action plan on carbon to the supply bills, in a sense to dare the Greens and Labor and others to oppose direct action. What do you think of taking those political measures to protect the government's legislation?
Well, I think, you know, they've still got to negotiate it through the Senate, either in the current one or the one where we'll have Clive Palmer and others needing to be negotiated with. If they want to throw extra money into it and have that approach, then that's fine by me. But I do think it's a worry to be the first country in the world to dismantle a carbon market. To dismantle, and this is lost in the debate, that what the current legislation does is actually set a declining limit on carbon pollution, on that heat-trapping carbon pollution. That's very important from our perspective and very important in enabling us to get to the 25%. So there are political games afoot and then happening as we speak, but for us the test of credibility is can either of the political alternatives have a plan for up to 25% reductions by 2020. The analysis that we've done and done with Monash University and Sinclair Knight Mertz and others is that the current legislation enables us to do that, but the government still doesn't. We can't see it even getting to 5% reductions, which is the bottom end of their range. And so we think they should be fully revealing their details, not just this funding package of how they can get to up to 25% before they repeal the legislation and the framework that's there. They need to reveal before they repeal.
John Connor, to close, do you still hold out any hope that the new Senate, the numbers might be there in the new Senate to preserve the market price on carbon, or is that a lost cause?
I don't think it's a lost cause. I mean, I think it's always wrong to view the politics of 12 months or 6 months or 9 months away from the politics we have now. I think there are international developments. The technology costs are declining rapidly. We are seeing carbon markets emerging in China, South Korea, South Africa is looking at carbon pricing. Of some of the reality of that action, that's the trend line of where we're going, may come through. And attitudes are emerging from this debate about a tax and a lie and trust and those things. We found those that public attitudes around climate change were emerging from the shadows of the carbon tax in June. They got thrust back in there, unfortunately, I think, by Kevin Rudd and put it in a cost of living frame. But I think events such as we've seen will also harden public attitudes. So I'm not, I don't think it's dead at all. There's some pretty clear intent about the place, but I think we'll look forward to a lively public debate. Some of those crossbenchers will see very significant opportunities for negotiation with the Commonwealth Government, and we don't know what the price they'll bring to the table. So in the long term, I'd like to see bipartisan agreement, get back to 2009, where we had both the major parties agreeing both on the need for action that we need, but also that we need a price and a limit on carbon pollution. That is something in the long term I'd still like us to get there. So let's get off our respective barbed wire fences and out of our respective trenches into a greater area of consensus, and let's get on with facing up to the risks and reducing the risks of climate change.
John Connor, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.